Welcome back. I'm joined by Dr. Teresa Pierre of Parents as First Educators and John Hilton O'Brien of Parents for Choice in Education. We're discussing the Trustees school board elections because if you live in certain provinces in this country, well, you're probably going to the ballot boxes sometime this fall. John, just before we went to commercial break, we were discussing the role of trustee. And I know I get this question fielded a lot from many of viewers and parents. They say, well, can a trustee actually do anything? Like, what is their limitations of power? Can they actually change the curriculum, or are they governed by the Minister of Education?
Well, trustees have limitations at both ends of the spectrum. You have to understand that what trustees do is they set policies, which are general directions, and they decide budgets, and they hire the superintendent who hires and directs everything else. And it's been so since the First World War, more or less. There are things they can't do. They don't decide the curriculum. That's a provincial matter. They don't directly hire teachers, and they don't directly decide if your kid gets into a program. They say what the rules of the game are going to be, and they enforce those rules. It's the superintendent who acts for them and is their only actual direct employee. And there are some things that are above them, like curriculum.
Okay, and Teresa, is that the case in Ontario, for example?
I would in a great part agree with what John just said. However, we do know that in Ontario, there are ways that the whole community can put pressure on the government to change curriculum. So there is a board in Ontario that has a sanitized sex ed curriculum, and that's because parents demanded that. So I would say that if the trustees are in connection with the parents working to see things adjusted, that can happen.
Okay. Now, I know sex ed, and maybe it still is, but I remember it being a very heated issue for the last, election cycle. Is sex ed, or the components of sex ed curriculum, are those still percolating? And if not, what are the issues that are percolating this election cycle? Teresa?
Well, I would say that the whole sex ed problem has not gone away in its in the things that made that role are still unrolling in the present. So gender theory, which is at the basis of that, which wants to eliminate the notion of a binary nature between the genders, that there's male and that there's female. They want to say gender is fluid, that there's multiple or many genders on a spectrum. That is now being seen more so in the trans kinds of issues that are facing the board. So the kids that want to make transition now are being supported by their schools, and they don't inform the parents of what's going on. They're not obliged to, and so we are seeing parents that are so upset about being given the runaround by their boards. That's one huge issue, along with critical race theory, of course. Critical race theory is a set of ideas about the relationship between races, and stating that whites are always the oppressors and people of color are always the oppressed. That's being pushed through our school systems like crazy right now. And that also has got parents very alarmed, especially after what happened in the States.
Well, when you speak about the gender theory, I remember that was it was a component, a contentious component in the Ontario sex ed curriculum, for example. So would it be fair to say that, 4 years post-implementation of that Doug Ford, Kathleen Wynne sex ed, that now we're just seeing the trickle-down effect? Teresa?
Absolutely. You could see it at the time. They were worried about the trans issues coming down the pipe, and now it's exactly what we feared those 4 years ago. That the chiseling away at the idea that there are two fixed genders has just continued to unpack itself since 2018.
So, John, I want you to jump in here. Some parents may be watching this program and say, well, I'm okay with that education. I don't have an issue with that. We only have 30 seconds before commercial. We can pick it up after. But, is there something wrong with this strain of education? Why are parents upset?
Look, The teaching on controversial issues has been used to drive a wedge between classrooms and families. Gender theory is being used as an excuse to not inform parents of critical events in their children's lives. Florida is setting out a law to address that, however they're doing it. Critical race theory is frankly subverted to take power away from children and families and give it to the teacher.